Main system. Engaging combat mode.
Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of barSILENCE. My name is Jamison, and I'm your host. Every episode of this show aims to explore the very best video game music from past and present. If you're new to the show, you can head over to barsilence.com where you can listen to past episodes, see track listings, as well as being able to find an easy link to subscribe on whatever your favorite podcatcher is. You can also listen on 8beats Radio, where the show plays live on the first Tuesday of every month. Check it out at 8beats.co, or check out the show notes for a link to 8beats, and then tune into excellent video game music 24/7 around the clock. In this episode, we're going to be listening to the music from the first 5 games in the Armored Core series on the PlayStation and PlayStation 2. The first Armored Core was released on the PlayStation in 1997 for Japan and North America, and then later in Europe in 1998. This post-apocalyptic mech combat game was a great halfway point for gamers between Virtual On by Sega that was released in 1996 in the arcade, and the more complex gameplay of the 1995 release of MechWarrior by Activision. What made Armored Core fit this void between those games was its blend of fast action, deep customization of mechs, and a unique coolness factor that's an excellent fit on the PlayStation. It released alongside other 1997 heavy hitters like Final Fantasy VII, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Ace Combat 2, Gran Turismo, and many other era-defining classics, and you could argue that it fits right in as an important release during that Hall of Fame year. In the first game, the story takes place in a post-apocalyptic version of Earth where most of the population has been wiped out in a war called the Great Destruction. After this disastrous event, most of the surviving population ends up living underground for 50 years. And in their desperation to survive, 2 giant corporations come to power and they are locked in a battle for supremacy over the remaining population. These ethically confused and possibly evil-leaning corporations use mercenaries for hire to do their dirty work, and you are part of a group called the Ravens that take on those various jobs using giant mechs called Armored Cores as you aim to build the ultimate machine. Due to its immediate success, a prequel was released in 1997 called Armored Core Project Phantasma. This time, the story for this prequel is set 2 years before the original game and takes players through a single plotline to defeat a radical group called the Doomsday Organization that has been operating in secret on Project Phantasma, which of course would have devastating consequences if it were to be implemented. So while the gameplay, graphics, and even most of its soundtrack was largely the same, this game included a unique multiplayer battle arena, as well as an import feature that allowed players to bring their character over from the first game. Both games reviewed pretty well at the time and have become early series favorites for gamers. And the soundtracks to these games are notable as well because they are very much a progressive step forward in terms of techno meets electronica in video game music. So, let's talk about the song that opened up this show. This excellent track is called Shape Memory Alloy's album version. It has a cool futuristic sound and a bouncy piano that makes this one of the more memorable songs from these games. Up next, we're going to listen to the song called Fall Pipe, which is a little bit more low-key, and it wears its ambient techno influences on its sleeve. The next track that we're going to hear is called Junk Mail, that has a relentless industrial sound with fast breakbeats and a grooving stereo panning lead. And then after that, we're going to hear the song called Mercury, which will help bring up the pace a little bit because we're going to follow it with the song called Mijk. Then to finish the block, we're going to listen to the song called Grip, album version, which comes from Armored Core Project Phantasma. This song's quick drum beat and vocal samples make for a highlight of this game's soundtrack, and it is definitely not to be missed. So enjoy these songs, and I'll be back afterwards to talk about Armored Core, Master of Arena. In 1999, the third game in the series, called Armored Core: Master of Arena, was released in Japan, and then later in 2000 in North America. The final game on the PlayStation 1 picks up right where Project Phantasma left off in terms of gameplay, with relatively few changes. The plot this time is about a survivor who lost his entire family in a huge battle that occurs before the game. This drives him into becoming a member of the Ravens as an Armored Core pilot, with the goal of enacting revenge on the pilot named Hustler 1, who he thinks is responsible for their deaths. After going through 19 different story missions to build both your reputation and mech, you head into 10 additional arena levels in your attempt to take down Hustler 1, only to discover a deeper conspiracy with a master AI who's been attempting to control the last bits of humanity. This heavily futuristic end of times meets corporatocracy storyline is a staple in the Armored Core series by famed developer From Software. Interestingly, one of the most important parts of the game's origin actually comes from when the development team reached out to the equally famed visual artist and mecha designer Shoji Kawamori. He has credits for developing the mechs in Macross, Ghost in the Shell, as well as developing the Diaclone toy line that went on to become the Transformers. While working with the team, he felt that fully customizable mechs would offer almost too much player freedom and instead proposed the idea of armored cores. This concept allows mechs to be built with interchangeable pieces like heads, arms, and legs to allow for different combat in different situations and environments. Which is pretty cool because he not only influenced the most important part of the game, he also essentially developed the name for this long-running series. Now, when it came to the music for From Software's first mech game, they hired a duo of composers named Keiichiro Segawa and Masaru Tateyama to work with Kota Hoshino, who's been part of every single game in the Armored Core series since its inception. And under his direction, the music is extremely unconventional and really helped to define the futuristic nature of this game. Now, what's really great about the soundtrack for Master of Arena is that it thrives under his direction, as well as the addition to the team of Tsukasa Saitoh. So to start things off for this next block, we're actually going to hear a song by Saitoh called Resonance Drive, which is probably my favorite from this soundtrack. Then following that, we're going to hear Boiled Down Aphid and X-Axis by Kota Hoshino. Both of these tracks deliver a combination of machine-like sounds and driving rhythms that make for a really great music for robots kind of vibe. Following that, we'll hear Servizio by Keiichiro Segawa that takes a heavy influence from Aphex Twin with its processed marching beats and twinkly poking synths. Then finally, we're going to hear 3 tracks by Tsukasa Saitoh that have a combination of blistering beats and dancier rhythms that effectively communicate that futuristic direction. We'll hear first Ambiguity, then Smash and Grab, and then to end the block, Synoptic Dope. So let's get into it, and I'll be back after that to talk about Armored Core 2 on the PlayStation 2 next. Armored Core 2 was released on the PlayStation 2 in August of 2000 and arrived in time for the North American launch of the console in October of that same year. The fourth game in the series acts as an indirect sequel to Master of Arena, and this time takes you 67 years into the future, right as the people of Earth are in the process of colonizing Mars. Of course, things still aren't going very well and humankind is struggling to survive. With the last bits of humanity still warring with itself, the Earth's government is dead set on re-establishing civilization on Mars and puts a puppet organization called the LCC in charge of the settlers. And to help enforce their preferred outcome, the Earth's government places a group of armored core wielding mercenaries called the Frighteners in a position where they can enact their will for them. These Frighteners are led by Leos Klein, a former Raven who eventually attempts a coup against the Earth's government and attempts to take control of newly discovered machines called Disorders. These incredibly powerful, unmanned units were left behind by an ancient civilization, and it's your job as a member of the Ravens to defeat Klein and dismantle the Frighteners. So when it comes to the gameplay, this sequel continues to bring the mech building madness to the forefront with dozens upon dozens of various upgrades available for your mech. The game features a slick interface, articulated mech animations, and stunning first-generation PlayStation 2 graphics that ran at a crisp 60 frames per second. This game easily had one of the best-looking graphics when the system first came out. And it wasn't just the visuals of the game that got a massive overhaul. The music in this game continues the high-level techno-influenced direction, but this time brings a refreshed level of quality and sophistication that perfectly matches the setting of Mars. Picking up where the team left off in Master of Arena, with an excellent blend of experimentation and unconventional electronic music, the composers Tsukasa Saitoh, Kota Hoshino, and Keiichiro Segawa return once again. This time, the team also added Okuya Ichino and the German DJ and producer Mijk von Dijk, who fans might recognize from Ghost in the Shell on PlayStation 1, as well as Ridge Racer 5 for the PlayStation 2. So with that said, let's get into our next block of songs. First up is a track called RoboComBat by Mijk von Dijk. This song has a slow build that ramps up and unleashes a solidly mechanical sounding drum beat paired with an eccentric futuristic sounding lead that really defines the target that this soundtrack was aiming for. Then, we'll follow that track with one of my absolute favorites from this game called Chord E by Tsukasa Saitoh. This song's pace never slows, and its dreamy synths and spacey effects build to a huge moment where it all comes together and sounds absolutely incredible. I think you're really gonna like this one. We'll follow that with Whiz Drop, which is also composed by Saitoh and is a great example of his range on this soundtrack. After that one, we'll hear a song called U-Turn that's credited to the From Software team. This one is a little more atmospheric and once again brings that dose of Aphex Twin inspiration into the soundtrack. There is also a bizarre moment in this track that I can really only describe as buttons on a microwave, or maybe your washing machine's done, and I absolutely love it. And then last, we're going to hear a song called The Frighteners, which is the theme of the main antagonist in the game, and this song definitely captures that darkness and the importance of these foes with its lead-in. Once this song gets going, it's a ride you do not want to get off of. So let's hop into our armored cores, engage combat mode, and I'll return after that. Armored Core 2: Another Age is the 5th game in the series that was released in 2001 for the PlayStation 2 in Japan and North America, and then later in Europe in 2002. This game is a direct sequel to Armored Core 2, but is also the final game in the continuity that began with the first game back in 1997, before Armored Core 3 reboots the series. Similar to Project Phantasma and Master of Arena, Another Age acts as an expansion for Armored Core 2. In this game, the arena has been removed, and instead they've added over 100 new missions that take place following the failed rebellion by Leos Klein just 5 years earlier. Following the devastating consequences of his radical actions and the weakening of the massive corporations that got tied up in it, the Earth government is struggling to relocate people from underground cities to the surface of the Earth. And to make matters worse, the government and those corporations have a shared antagonistic enemy in a group called the Indies who are engaging battles with both sides, and their sole aim is to establish a new government for the people. At the time, the game was met with generally positive reviews. It continued the same high-quality experience that fans of the series were expecting, and, for the sake of our show, the soundtrack also picked up right where it left off. So in this next block, we're going to start things off with the spacey-sounding techno and driving drums of the song called In the Shell. And then we're going to follow that with a track called Waves with excellent layering of sounds and downbeat rhythms. Next, we're going to hear Delta Ray by Tsukasa Saitoh. This song really gives you that if robots could make music kind of vibe that's in total contrast to the softer sounding, more human elements of the song, and it all comes together really nicely at the end. Then we'll hear a song called The Groove, which was also composed by Saitoh, that continues that music by robot sound. And finally, to finish the block, we're going to listen to a track called Out of Control by Yuji Kanda. This song has a synthy and ethereal sound that makes for a great example of how different composers can approach the same theme in dissimilar ways, but still develop music that fits together fantastically. So enjoy these tracks, and I'll be back after that. And that's our show. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this episode of barSILENCE about the music from the early entries of the Armored Core series and their experimental mech-inspired soundtracks. If you want to interact with the show and tell me what you think about my selections in this episode, you can follow me on a variety of social media platforms. I am most active on Twitter at barSILENCEVGM. You can also check the show notes to find links to follow the show on Tumblr and Instagram. That's where I'll be posting various information about the games featured in this episode. And, same as always, please consider taking a moment to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening to this show, because I'd really love to hear what you think. Don't forget, you can go to barsilence.com to listen to past shows if you missed any, and of course, if you're feeling giving, you can always support barSILENCE on Patreon. Check the show notes to find an easy link to contribute. And for already being Patreon subscribers of our show, I want to thank listeners Zoe and Alusa, as well as Cameron, who is our most recent addition to the Legion of VGM. The three of you help to keep this show going every month, and I cannot thank you enough. You are the best. Thank you so much for being part of this show. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. I also want to thank friend of the show, contributor, and fellow VGM podcaster Professor Tom of the Shujin Academy VGM Club as well. You can and should check out his show wherever you find podcasts, or head to the show notes and you'll find a link to tune in there. Additional thanks also go out to show sponsor Bold Pick'n Specialty Pickles. You should absolutely check out this independently owned, flavor-forward pickle company. Head to boldpickens.com to see if you can find them in stores near you. So, to end this show, I have a final track to play us out. This song is called Theme from Armored Core that comes from the 4th disc of the 20th anniversary soundtrack box set. This bassy and ravey track is hardcore techno at its best, and it's exactly what you're going to need to hear to get you hyped to pilot a futuristic mech in battle. So that's our show. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.
Target destruction verified. Mission objective achieved. System switched to normal mode.